Good morning to our UK column viewers and listeners, and I'm delighted to have an extremely interesting interview today. I'm joined by two people that I know very well because they're fellow dog walkers, and this is going to form the meat of the story. So today I'm joined by Paul Southcombe and Judy Latimer, and they're going to tell us about a really extraordinary incident that they experienced when they tried to exercise their dogs on a sports field just outside Plymouth. So, Judy, Paul, welcome to UK Column.
Thank you.
I think the best way to start this story is to put up a headline which appeared in the Plymouth Live after the local newspaper effectively came to speak to you both. So let's have a look at this on screen. We've got Plymouth pensioners say they're traumatised after being followed by sinister council dog wardens. And Judy said the Plymouth City Council dog wardens were out for our blood after they followed her to the toilet. So that sub-headline is really remarkable. I'm going to look at you, Judy, to start off. We'll say ladies first for the UK column today. Just give us a little bit of an introduction as to what happened, and then we'll bring Paul in.
Okay. Well, this incident took place on February the 7th, I think it was. It was a Tuesday. It was an absolutely beautiful, crisp morning here in Plymstock. And Paul and I and 4 or 5 other dog walkers had just completed a couple of laps of the field. The other people dispersed, and we stayed to talk to a couple of ladies who were throwing balls for the dogs in the far field. And then the fields were completely empty apart from ourselves. And then 2 dog wardens appeared from behind. We hadn't noticed them, and they set their knapsacks down on the field and started to get their paperwork out. And they had no appearance of being any official wardens at all. And Paul said to one of them, "Well, where's your uniform?" And he said, "Oh, hold on a minute, I'll get it. It's in my bag. Do you want to see it?" And I thought, well, this is a charade. I said to Paul, "Let's go." And we walked off the field. And to our surprise at that point, these 2 guys followed us and started shouting to us and, "Hey, stop and give us your information." And they actually followed us into Pomfret and then Arreston and down Breakwater Road, and they followed us for 2 hours, constantly haranguing us, calling the police, and we were just absolutely gobsmacked. All we had done was take the dogs off the lead.
Judy, thank you for that. Just to set the scene for people who are listening in other parts of UK and overseas, you're talking about areas that are relatively close to the park. So you moved off the park, and you're trying really to get away from these 2 individuals, and you're walking around streets local to that area. So, Paul, let's bring you in here, because I think the initial engagement with these 2 individuals was with yourself. So you're out walking the dogs. You don't notice these people. Sort of where did they come from?
Well, they came out of the blue. The recreation ground is basically in 2 parts, 2 fields, and the parking lot, the car park, is at the far end next to the Plymstock Road, and we were over the 2 fields and on the other end of it. So they got out of their car or their van, and they'd come down the side of one field, entered the other field where we were, and then came directly from behind us. And it's just that I happened to glance back and saw them rapidly bearing down on us. And it's the first I'd seen them. And I'd never seen them before. I'd certainly never heard of them coming any sort of activity from dog wardens at that time of the day in that field. I just quite totally surprised, basically. They came up behind us, and it was very, very menacing, very, very direct. They had a belligerent attitude. They had a sort of yobbo attitude about them. Dressed in hoodies, and one had a baseball cap on back to front, and it's very strange to me. And being a pensioner, I do take note when we get the warnings about scams and people targeting pensioners to con them out of money. And I immediately suspected it was something like that. I couldn't bring my mind around thinking, well, these are from the council. They're totally unprofessional to do it. If that is, it turned out ultimately that they were from the council. Just a very unprofessional way to approach the members of the public, especially when they're the public that pay for your existence. They expect a little more civility than what we got.
Did they show you? Were they wearing any ID, or did they show you any ID at this stage?
I said, if you're from the council, where's your ID? And the chap lifted back his jacket, and he had a laminate clipped to it's a small thing, about so big, clipped to his shirt. And he said, oh, there's my ID. And it's the sort of thing you could have made on your own PC, to be honest. And from where I stood, my eyes are as old as I am, so they weren't very good. I couldn't really see a lot of it, but I didn't want to get my head any closer to him than it was. And it just looked, I didn't know what to make of it. And then when I asked about his uniform, he said, oh, it's in my bag. And he was a bit snappy about it and a bit offended that I should ask, and I just thought, these guys, I was just suspicious enough, or cynical enough, if you like, but I didn't like the idea of it, and my attitude is to just walk away when it's like that. With bullies, I've always stood up to bullies, but I had a feeling that this was wrong. This was just wrong, and we decided to walk away.
If I can just come in here at this point, because there's something really about this discussion which is very important, because ultimately this is about a number of things, but the thing which most people will pick up on, it's about keeping public areas and sports fields in particular free of dog fouling. Now you two are both dog owners. I'm a dog owner. And I'm very happy to say to our audience, I certainly appreciate how unpleasant it is if dogs are fouling recreation areas or footpaths, and it's beholden on the dog owners to make sure that they tidy up after their dogs. In this case, your dogs had not fouled the grass, they'd done something different. They'd crossed a white line. Have I got that part of the story right?
Yes, that's right. We were stood on the edge of what they use as a football pitch. They've got, I think, 4 football pitches. It's only Plymstock Football Club. It's not Manchester United, but they've got 4 pitches. And they extend as far as they can out to the perimeters of the field. So you've got to cross. There was nobody playing football or practicing or anything. The fields are pretty empty. And we'd walked across with our dogs to talk to these 2 ladies that we were talking to. So they must have watched us do that. And then on the way down. But yes, we'd actually walked our dog across the pitch, or our dogs across the pitch, without putting a lead on them. But the dogs, they didn't. They were only on the pitch to get to the other side. They certainly weren't on the pitch to relieve themselves. We'd been there down an hour already, and they would have done so before if they'd wanted to.
If you think about it, had we not been there, and the couple of ladies we were talking to, the recreation field, park, pitch, whatever it's called, that green space would have been empty. And that
Yes.
seems to be what is desired, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. You know, I live just adjacent to these fields, beautiful area to walk your dog. I pick up the people that I walk with, pick up with very, very conscious of having nice clean field. But it looks like this policy is out to vacate the fields, empty the fields. And isn't that sad?
Well, as a dog walker, I'd say it's sad, but I want to emphasise this point so that our audience really understand what's happened here. So the crime that's been committed that has excited these two officials from Plymouth City Council is the fact that your dogs were off a lead and they crossed a white line, which meant that the dogs went on to the playing field area. The dogs didn't foul that area. It was simply that the dogs were off the lead when they crossed the white line.
That's correct, yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now just take us through in a bit more detail what happened when you tried to get away from the two dog wardens.
I said to Judy, come on, let's go. I don't like this. And we walked off, walked away from them. And they immediately grabbed their bags and they followed us at close proximity. And I thought, they're not going to get off our backs. They're obviously going to pester us on this. So we came to one of the exits to the field. And so we walked out into the built-up area to get rid of them. We just didn't want anything more to do with them. And they just followed us, you know, very close. They got up close and then dropped back and got up close and then dropped back again. But they followed us for the next 2 hours from there. So it was a very deliberate act. They came to get us, if you like. And they were going to get us one way or the other. I had the feeling that you had if you remember when you're at school and the school bully starts following you around the school and you think, oh no, I'm in trouble here. And that's the feeling that I got. And I learned at school to turn around and face them and to stand up for myself. And bullies are cowards and they generally they walk away. But these guys were claiming to be from the council. They had body cameras, which you can buy on eBay for about 50 quid. So I was still very unsure about their story. But I had that feeling that I was being bullied, and I felt under duress immediately.
Paul, as you were walking along, did they speak to you?
Oh yeah, they kept saying, "Well, just give us your details and we'll leave you alone." And I think the details they were asking for was name and address, phone number, and email address for whatever reason.
And date of birth.
And date of birth, yes, that's right. Strange sort of collection of information for dog wardens, I thought. But I was still highly suspicious of the whole thing, and I certainly wasn't going to turn around and talk to them because I did feel under duress, and I know Judy was as well. And I could see a confrontation brimming if we didn't get away. And so we just kept walking, and they kept talking. Later on, we went down to the end of Breakwater Road and through into the boatyard there, which by this time we'd been out quite a while. I mean,
that's an hour after. Yeah,
it's got to be a mile or so away from where we started. And we went into the cafe there to try and get some respite from them, their attentions. And they walked into the cafe behind us and stood at our table, with arms folded, just stood there like guards, I suppose. People in the cafe trying to have a meal. Everybody was looking. It was very uncomfortable for everybody. We had to leave there because it was an uncomfortable situation. Judy wanted to go to the toilet before leaving, so she got the code number for the toilet lock from the cafe owner and went to the toilet. One of them positioned himself right outside the door, went out, followed her to the toilet, and positioned himself outside the door while she was inside. It's very sinister. It was getting more sinister as we went on.
At some stage, Judy, you took a picture of these two men in the cafe. So on screen, we can see two powerfully built men in their hoodies, as you say, and one's got his baseball cap on back to front. These don't look professional individuals. They've got their phones out, but this is in a local cafe. They followed you in, and they are deliberately being intimidating by standing by your table, but they take it even further and follow you, Judy, to the toilet. So what did...
With their coffee, yes, just standing there, not, they were enjoying themselves. They'd bought themselves a coffee each whilst we had a coffee, and it was a good morning for them.
Was it both stood outside the ladies, or one of them?
Yes, eventually, yes, because I went first, obviously, and then Paul followed, holding my dog. And when I came out of the ladies, I took a snap of the two of them, and they were there just adjacent to the toilet building.
How did that make you feel?
Well, it was just so much of an overreaction. What our felony had been was to unclip our dogs on an empty field on a beautiful morning, and for that, we were an hour into being threatened with the police, repeatedly harassed, taunted, insolent remarks, and then this was halfway through. I felt that there was no escape. We didn't know what to do.
Judy, give us a bit more detail, because you've used some pretty hard descriptions there. You're being taunted, being harassed.
Totally.
What were they doing that you found?
Well, when we left the cafe, we got back up onto the main road and opposite the Morrison supermarket, and there was a small wall, a low wall there. And I sat down. I said to Judy, I'm struggling a bit with this because I have a pacemaker fitted, so my heart is not the most reliable, and I'm diabetic, and that doesn't help either. And I was starting to feel the strain, so I sat down. And they were pestering us for our details. They said, we're going to call the police, and they'll come and give you information. It all sounded like, it honestly was just like schoolboy bullying. It was just very intimidating. And I turned around to them and I said, look, for your own benefit, I'll tell you the situation. I'm fitted with a pacemaker for a good reason, and I'm a diabetic. And I'm not coping with it very well at the moment. I said, so I'm telling you that to let you know for your own information. And they just started mocking me. They go, oh, right, do you want us to call an ambulance then? And I couldn't believe what I dislike dealing with 10-year-olds in the school playground. And I said, no, I don't. I opened my shirt to show him that, you can see where the pacemaker is. It's obvious. I showed him. I said, look, I'm not kidding. I'm serious about this. And he said, I've got a camera.
And I thought, but he did it.
He did. It was surreal. Is the best word for it, Brian. It's intimidating, but surreal. And I was seriously concerned. I was concerned. I did not want to get into a confrontation with these two guys, because I am a redhead. I'm not now, but I'm a redhead still inside. And I always stood up to them. I thought, I don't want to be involved with this at all. I've got to get away. So we got up and we started walking again up the road, which used to be the old railway line, converted to a pathway into the back of a Reston school, and goes into Radford Park. And all the way there, that's when they really started chatting and talking to us and aggravating us. At one point, I turned around because my dog was lagging behind a bit to call him, and the guy was just making a grab for my dog, and he stopped the minute I warned him not to. And he stopped, and he was obviously didn't like that very much. And I called my dog up, and he said, "Oh, your dog's not under control." And I said, "It certainly is. He's fine, and he should be on a lead." And that's a lie, because there's no dog lead signs anywhere on that bit of road. Then they were continually trying to call the police, and I heard at one point they left it on speaker, and they had the phone pointed towards us, and I distinctly heard the girl police operator saying, "Look, I've told you, if there's no ambulance involved, we won't be attending. It's not our business." And I thought, well, who are they talking to? And I realised it was the police. I'd already, by that time, I'd also realised that the threat of calling the police was just that. It was a threat. It meant nothing.
Bogus, wasn't it?
But yeah, and then they started on like the fines that we were totting up. They were adding up the fines. Oh, that's £100 for walking your dog off the lead, and another.
But it was all sing-song. This was before, yes. As we left the incident where Paul had shown his pacemaker, and we had this thing with and I've got a camera. Then they started whooping their arms up and saying, "Well, it's £50 because you took your dog off the lead. It's £50 because you didn't want to give us your details, and there's two of you." So they were going on. That's £200, weren't they?
And then they started telling us how much they were enjoying it.
That's right. Yeah, that's just incredible.
Two grown men who were clearly intimidating by their size and their demeanour, but they're also behaving like children. This to me sounds a very dangerous combination. You're faced with two adults who are being hostile to you, but they're also behaving like children. This, I could imagine, would be very frightening.
It was pathetic, but it was disturbing, very disturbing, because you didn't know what they were going to do next. I mean, it could have become very unpleasant. And that was at the back of my mind the whole time. Obviously, we were threatened. We were under duress the whole time. And they wouldn't let us off it. They just kept coming up behind. And at one point, they were talking all the time to somebody who was controlling them. And I didn't know who they worked for or who was behind it. As it later turned out, it was obviously they were talking to somebody on the council and being directed to do this by the council. And this guy walked up behind Judy after these little outbursts and started, in another sing-song voice, repeated her address and said, "Does that ring any bells, Judy?"
Yeah.
And we hadn't given them any details at all, so they got that through whoever was controlling them. So if they really just wanted our details, well, why at that point did they not say to Judy, "You can go home. We've got your details." They knew her name, they knew her address.
Do you know why they would have access to your address?
Yes, because, well, prior to this incident in February, I had tried to contact my local councillor, Rebecca Smith. I'd written to her 3 times and got no answer. And so I set up a petition to try and see what was going on and trying to stop the council from continuing with this policy, and the petition basically states you should be fining people who don't pick up dog dirt, but you shouldn't be fining people whose dogs cross the white line. And this was starting to take off. And this morning, when we were met by the dog wardens, I was just giving a petition to one of the ladies we mentioned previously. And the dog warden came up and he said, "Can I have that?" And he just took it.
Just took it from her, yeah.
So he was able, he was on his phone all the time and he had the backup in the office. So it's got the petition site, and the petition site has my name on it. I was local, so it was easy peasy for them to see who I was.
So let's just follow it through to the sort of conclusion of your interaction with these two guys. You are trying to move on all the time and get away from them.
Yes.
So you've been in the cafe, you've come out of the cafe, you've gone through Radford Park, I think it was, and where do you go next in order to try and get away from these two individuals?
Well, while we were in Radford Park, there are a number of benches, and I sat in probably every one of them. I was definitely feeling it by this time.
He was great.
There
He
you
was
go.
great.
I didn't realise
Yeah.
I'd turned colour, but I was feeling very off. And there's a cafe up by the Prater shops that we know to be dog friendly. So we thought we'd head up there and go in there and have another coffee, and just for the respite, just to get away from them. And Judy knows the owner; she's met him, and he's very dog conscious, and he wouldn't stand for any nonsense in his cafe. So we thought this sounds like a safe place for us to be. But by this time, I wasn't feeling too bright, in all honesty. As before we got there, we then we came up to the Dean Cross surgery, which was open, and it was very busy, absolutely chock a block, wasn't it? People going in and out. It was obviously very busy. And Judy said, "Look, you're looking very great. I don't like the look of you. I think you need to be in there having a checkup." And I wasn't going to argue. I agreed totally. So we went in there, and a nurse rushed down and said, "We're full. We're absolutely full. I'm sorry. The doctor said we can't take anybody else today." And I thought, "Oh God, we're going to have to go back out and face these two chaps again." And the receptionist, for some reason, she was leaning back in her chair and looking very quizzical. And she's looking over my shoulder. And then she looked at me. She said, "Well, what is your problem?" And I said, "Well, I've got a pacemaker and I'm diabetic, and I need somebody to just check me over to make sure, because I'm not feeling well." And then I realised she was looking over my shoulder, and I turned, and this guy was stood behind me, just waiting, And I said, "Well, that's my problem." And the whole thing changed. The surgery was superb.
Yeah, because you said they've been following us for 2 hours.
Yeah, I explained the situation. And the surgery was just superb. They whisked me behind the counter into a small room out the back to get me out of the way of this guy. He couldn't come through. And they started checking me over. The nurse sat me down and she said, "Was your heartbeat going exceptionally fast?" I said, "Well, I presume so, but I don't really remember anything in particular. I just remember feeling very out of sorts." And she said, "Well, I can feel it coming down now." She had her hand on my chest. And I went through a series of tests. I went into the doctor's surgery, and she put the blood pressure on me and everything. Took a blood sugar reading, which was abnormally high, very high, which I think was probably at the root of the problem. And then I had to go in another room and have a cardiograph. While I was having that, a policeman came in, and the surgery had called an ambulance, and as a consequence, the police were informed, and they came as a consequence of the ambulance being phoned. And I spoke I gave him my details, and I talked to the policeman. The ambulance people were very, very good about the whole thing. Their option, the preferred option, was for them to take me to Derriford and have proper tests done. But the ambulance man said, "We're happy to do that, but we have to tell you, you'll be sat in the ambulance for 5 hours at Derriford before you could even go in." And I thought, well, look, if you think I'm okay to get up and walk home, I'd rather do that rather than deny an ambulance to somebody who would be better off in an ambulance with two paramedics having a heart attack. Somebody would be better off in that situation, and I didn't want to be the guy, taking that provision away from somebody. So I said I'd want to go home, and they were all in agreement. They said, "No, that's sensible enough." So we went outside, and I was looking around, and the policeman said, "Don't worry, sir, they've gone." And Judy heard them tell these two guys to just go away and leave us alone. So the presence of the police, far from being a threat, was I wish I'd just said, "Yeah, call them, please," because
just whilst Paul was receiving medical attention, or he'd been taken out of the reception area. The reception area is very tiny, and I was feeling pretty jaded. I was sitting on the floor with my head in my hands, just thinking, "Oh my goodness," And I looked up and I saw this young policeman, and I said, "Oh, thank goodness for that," because I could see that he was a breath of fresh air. And he said, "I'm not here about your dispute with the council. We don't get involved in these matters." He said, "I'm here because we understand a gentleman is unwell." And I thought, well, thank goodness for that. And from that moment, the two young police officers, a young man and a woman, were extremely helpful and very sympathetic. And I sat chatting with them in the back office, and all the reception people at Dean Cross surgery. Was it Dean Cross? What was it called?
It was. Yeah,
at the surgery, they were so friendly.
Yeah, superb.
Yeah. So
Right.
we left, and I said to Paul, "You know what? We need evidence, and we walked back to Dean Cross because we were just 2 or 3 minutes from there." And I took out my phone and I took a video, which took about 12 minutes. It took over 10 minutes. And we walked all around the perimeter, and there wasn't one single sign telling you that this dog enforcement law was applicable. So, I mean, I knew that it was in theory, but imagine if you'd have come from Nottingham or London and you're walking your dog, that would be entrapment.
Yes.
Because there wasn't a single sign. I have the video. It shows every bit of fencing all around. We walked all around, didn't we, in a loop, and there wasn't anything, and there isn't today.
Judy, thank you very much for that. So this whole saga, and I'm sure there are people who will be watching and listening to this interview who will be utterly stunned at what you're describing. So the pressure from these two men altogether lasted over 2 hours. How long was it until you were finally free of them?
It was 2 hours pretty much, and then we were both physically, psychologically, we were very stressed, and I have been surprised, Paul has been surprised at how much of a toll this has taken on the pair of us. We're both in our 70s, and we're not really Rambo. So we walked around the perimeter of the field.
Not really Rambo anymore.
Yeah. And we came back to my house, and we were jiggered basically, and the actual psychological and emotional toll took weeks and weeks and weeks. I phoned my doctor twice to get some kind of relief from this. And Paul equally has been in touch with his GP.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm new to this diabetes, and diabetes it affects your whole nervous system, and the nervous system was very active this day. It had really been jogged out of its sleep, I think. And that's, I think, what's causing the problem. But I was amazed. I've always been fairly robust. I played a lot of rugby. I was a merchant seaman. I learned at an early age not to stand up, not to stand for bullies pushing me around. I've always been fairly robust. I was amazed. There was one morning, the morning after this incident, I went downstairs, made myself a cup of coffee, took it back to bed, and I usually read my newspaper on a download on my tablet, and I sat in bed trying to read that, and and there were tears streaming down my cheeks. I wasn't crying, but I couldn't stop these tears. I thought, oh, what's happening? And my system was severely shaken. I've spoken to the doctors since. I'm waiting on, I should get the result this week of when they do a blood test for diabetes, they do a different test to the one where you just prick your finger, and that's much more comprehensive. And I asked them to get one of those for me to see just how much, if it has affected my diabetes. I've had an adverse diabetic eye examination. I've only had 2 of them before, and they were both fine. They said, no, your eyes are okay. The diabetes hasn't affected it. But the one I had immediately after this incident showed this eye in particular has started to deteriorate quite badly. And this is all interconnected. So I don't know how. I'm still in the process of trying to put it all together. But I was definitely in a state that I've never been in before.
Right.
Just emotion, it was definitely the nervous system that had been affected.
I am not surprised with what you describe. It would be intimidating for anybody. I mean, you could have been a fit young guy, but you would have still had 2 big blokes in hoodies following you around. So let's just bring up on screen some comments that were made by Plymouth City Council. Now, these were printed in the Plymouth Live article talking about it. So this is the first part. Following a number of complaints from residents about dog fouling in Dean Cross Park, 2 plainclothes enforcement officers visited the park on Tuesday. While on patrol, the officers spotted 2 people breaching the Dog Control Public Spaces Protection Order by allowing their dogs to exercise off the lead on a marked sports pitch. When the couple were approached, they were uncooperative and refused to give their details to the officers. Dog fouling is unwanted on all streets and open spaces in Plymouth, but particularly on sports pitches because of the health risks to children and adults who play sports. Keeping dogs on a lead on the pitches ensures the owners notice when their dog has fouled and can pick up straight away. So we've put the comment from Plymouth City Council. Now, the more astute viewers will notice that is an anonymous response from Plymouth City Council, so no individual from the council was prepared to put their name to the response. But of course, the whole point of the response they've made is to direct people's attention to dog fouling and the need to keep pitches clean and not to deal with the issue at hand, which is actually the fact that your dog simply crossed a line, but you were then followed, harassed, intimidated by 2 of the Plymouth City Council workers. So where I'm leading to with this is that, Judy, I think it was you in particular. You've made some inquiries of Plymouth City Council to find out more about the laws that they're using and to find out more about their approach. So I'll get you to comment, but I'll just bring this one up on screen. You had an email exchange with Nicola Horn, who's the Environmental Protection Manager, Public Protection Service at the City Council. And in her reply to, I'll just give the second paragraph, it says, dog-related antisocial behaviour such as fouling is a commonly reported issue, and the health and safety risk to users of park spaces, sports pitches or staff who maintain our parks and open spaces is a responsibility of the council. Many of the dog on lead controls are to ensure those in control of dogs can easily identify dog feces and pick it up. However, there are other reasons for implementing, such as general safety. It's important for a council to consider the requirements and views of both the dog owning and non-dog owning community and ensure that our parks and open spaces are free to enjoy for all residents, businesses and visitors to our city. So what was your reaction to Nicola Horn's response to you? I didn't see that you actually got an apology for what happened. What I'm picking up is more that they just like restating what the policy is.
Correct. It was, I had written 3 times to my local councillor, and because after the first letter, she said, I'll get back to you, and she didn't. I then also sent my letters to the other 5 local councillors in Plymstock. There are 6 wards in Plymstock, and they're all Conservative wards. And in following letters 2 and 3, there was no response from anybody, certainly not my own councillor, but a gentleman called Councillor Wakeham sent my letter to the appropriate authority, the appropriate department, which was this department that Nicola Horn leads, the environmental quality. So it was a technical department, not a political department, and a councillor I had written to because she was a politician, but she didn't reply. So I think that it was simply a deflection for somebody to write to me and tell me what the law stated. The law states that we have the right to do this, and it was just a way of shutting me up, essentially.
I find it quite sinister, the title there of this individual: Environmental Health, Environmental Protection Manager, Public Protection Service. It smacks of 1984, and the last thing it makes me feel is that anybody is being protected. But that's just my opinion. Now, Paul, you tried writing to your local MP, who is Gary Streeter. He gave you a reply, which I'd like to bring up on screen here. Let me just read through. Dear Mr. Southcombe, thank you for your email about the issue of dog walking and dog wardens in Plymstock. I'm sorry to hear of the distress you recently experienced at Dean Cross playing fields. Having made inquiries, it has been confirmed the men you have described were Plymouth City Council employees, and the incident in question is being investigated. No further information has been provided. However, local ward councillors have informed me that they have already raised this issue with the council and asked for clarity by way of better signage, and that dog wardens be in uniform rather than following people in plain clothes as you experienced. That said, I am aware that dog wardens have been used across the city for some time to manage, in particular, dogs being exercised off leads on designated sports pitches or areas with children playing. It's my understanding that Dean Cross playing fields are included in this grouping as the playing pitches are council owned. Clearly, whilst dog owners wish to exercise their pets in their local area, they are at times using the same land as local sports clubs who do not want to deal with the mess left behind by less responsible owners. I appreciate that this impacts on all dog owners, the responsible and less responsible, but having heard from local sports clubs, I am aware of the inconvenience they face dealing with insanitary detritus left behind by some. So to me, this is, well, I would say a very classic politician's letter, because there's certainly no compassion for you in any way in this letter, even though what you've described to our audience today is pretty incredible. He does admit that they were Plymouth City Council employees. He also says the matter in question is being investigated. Has there been any further report to you about what that investigation has achieved? Has Gary Streeter followed up on the investigation?
None whatsoever. Absolutely none whatsoever. And I'm not looking for an apology. It would be too late now. It would mean nothing. But what I'd like somebody to do is admit that this is just a money-making exercise. stopping dogs from being there, crossing this white line off a lead, is not going to do anything for the people to solve the problem of those who allow their dogs to foul the pitch and don't pick up after them. It's nothing to do with the people who do that religiously, as organised dog walkers do. I just want them to take this silly aberration out of the system, because it's a flimsy excuse to extract yet more money from the council taxpayers. And I think they could do without that.
Let's reinforce a little bit of what you suspect is going on, because of course, Judy, you took some further action and you made some freedom of information requests. And I've got here just a little snapshot of some of the data that you got back. So this first one is about, you were asking where fines were issued, and in the response, and note it's official sensitive. This fascinated me. Why should it be sensitive where people are being fined by Plymouth City Council? But there we are. So we've got a number of park and recreation ground locations, and against each one are numbers, which I take are the numbers of people who were ultimately fined for allowing their dogs to walk off lead in these particular areas. Is that your understanding of this particular document?
Yes, this relates to the last 6 months of 2022. And I notice that Central Park is an absolute maelstrom. You can walk your dog here and you can't there. So a lot of people are fined because they stray innocently from one area to another without realizing they're in the danger zone. And so they get fined. And King George V playing fields has historically been the second most fined area. And interestingly, somebody else set up a Facebook page called White Lines Fines to relate to the harassment that we are suffering. And the councillor who is responsible for King George V is Miss Pengelly. Is it Vivian?
Vivian.
Yeah. And she said, oh, well, I regularly walk my dogs here, and I've been down to the rugby club and they're very friendly. They want to invite people in and they're not at all antagonistic to dogs. So I put on them, well, that may well be. They may be benign people, but it's not them. It's the council representatives who are antagonistic towards us and who are fining us. And there was no follow-up.
Just to give the numbers again there, so Central Park, the main one, there were 59 people had been, thank you, Stephanie, there were 59 people who'd been fined, and then King George V playing fields, which you mentioned, is 21. So those are the top ones. Westhoe Park 10, St Mary's 9, and then it drops down to relatively minor numbers. But this is the next document which you kindly sent through to me, and I found this fascinating because you'd asked about fines contested and not paid, and in the little table that came back we see some very interesting things. So the crimes listed: dog fouling, dog off lead, dog exclusion, dog on lead by direction, means to pick up. I think that's probably an excuse. Somebody would have said, I meant to pick it up. I don't know whether I got that correct. But what you can see immediately is that 111 fines was simply because a dog was off the lead, whereas the number of dogs that had fouled was only 6. And I found this a fascinating statistic.
I started looking into this and going back to 2019, which is the year prior to the council starting off this public spaces protection order. And there wasn't an offence of having your dog off lead on a sports pitch at that point. And the income generated was minimal. because I think in several months during the year of 2019, zero fines were issued under dog control. Zero. So if you tot up the 12 months of 2019, there's very little income. But after they introduced the PSPO, it was voted in 2020. The dog control offences were added to, so that an offence was now having your dog off lead on a sports pitch, which previously had not been an offence. It only became an offence with this PSPO. And to be honest, nobody knew about it. And to this day, almost nobody knows about it. Certainly nobody who doesn't have a dog, and most people who do have a dog have no idea what a PSPO is, and they are completely clueless. There
Right.
is inadequate signage in the places. There has been inadequate signage. There is zero signage in some places. And so it is so easy to pick up money because your dog has crossed the line. People here in our local fields have been walking their dogs in these same fields for generations, literally generations.
I have since I was 5. Work it out.
And these old ladies coming on onto the field there, and they just let the dog off. They're responsible people who pick up, but they're approached by these guys who say, just come over here, we've got a photograph of your dog crossing that white line. And these poor old ladies by themselves, walking by themselves, they are in tears. They don't know what's hit them. They've got no idea about law. There's no signage. And it's absolutely
Right, and
preposterous.
the basic fine for a dog crossing the line is £100. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
£100 to many pensioners can be the difference between eating a week and not.
One of the people that we know had the same experience as we had. And this lady is a nurse. She just lives adjacent to the fields. She popped out to walk her dog, very responsible dog owner, approached by the wardens, and she knew she had to be on shift soon. She only had 5 minutes, but she saw these two guys approaching, and she saw that her dog was off the lead, so she left. She left, as we had done, by an exit, and they started harassing her and calling the police and etc., etc. And she was extremely stressed. In fact, she still is, and she refuses to go on these fields now. But the thing is that she had to go back towards her house because she was going to work. So she came back and she had a conversation. She said, look, she said, I've picked up after my dog. There is no signage here. There are no white lines. And the guy said to her, oh, well, there's a guy over there. He's painting the white lines. They'll be up soon. And she said, well, what, that's no way to run a situation like this. And they said to her, well, the best thing you can do is to give us your details and then you can test it. And so she was so frazzled that she gave her details. And a few days later, her husband contested. And they say there's no way you can contest it.
We're jumping back a little bit, but I think this is important to stress to the audience. You've got men appearing out of nowhere demanding information from you as if it's their right to know who you are. And you found that intimidating, and I can imagine that a lady on her own would find it particularly intimidating.
Yes, surely, yeah.
So we've got the council using what I would say totally inappropriate people to do this job, but what you're picking up on is the fact that Plymouth City Council is making money out of the activities of these men. I don't know whether there's women doing the jobs as well. We'll say these men.
Yes, right.
So
Yeah.
they're picking up money from the fines, not for dog fouling, but for a dog crossing a white line. But your investigation took you a little bit deeper because you got interested in who actually owned the public spaces and how much money the city council was actually taking for leases. So I'll just bring this up on screen. So this is part of your freedom of information response, and you've asked how much income is generated for Plymouth City Council by its leasing fields to sports clubs within the town. And the reply is essentially 43,000, and it says it includes commercial rent income from pitches, bowling greens, pavilions and tennis courts, as the request is targeted at sports clubs. I've included this data, and I'll just pop the next one up on screen because you also got some particular information about the area in question. And so they sent you a map of land that was leased by Plymouth City Council to Sports Club in the Plymstock Dean Cross area of Plymouth.
Right.
And I find it interesting that's labelled Corporate and Business Property Department of Development. But what's interested you, and correct me if I've got this wrong, Judy, is that it would appear that originally the green spaces were actually donated by people for the recreational use of people in Plymouth. And now it appears that that donated land has been hoovered up by Plymouth into what you've described as a money-making scheme.
I have asked under the Freedom of Information for the covenant because old-timers, I've only been in Plymouth since 2016, but I've noticed that a lot of the people I meet have been here for generations. Their families have been here, and a lot of old-timers have said, oh yes, these fields were given to Plymstock in a covenant. The people of Plymstock and the people of Elberton. And somebody put on a Facebook page, a guy in his 80s had said also the land where the car parking is in Plymstock by the Broadway. But I haven't been able to see these covenants. The only one that we saw dated back to 47, was it?
46.
46. We can, Judy, we can bring that. I think this is the one. This is talking about a conveyance of land in this title and other land dated the 25th of March 1946, made between Priscilla Littleton Mitchell and also Wallace Littleton Ridge and the Rural District Council of Plimpton St Mary, contains covenants. And the Plymouth City Council also said to you, we'll have to request the deed packet to see if we have a copy of the 1946 conveyance, and this will take several weeks to arrive. So was that the one that you were referring to or trying to recall?
Yes, well, to be honest, I don't know what the last legal document is relating to these fields. But the one that we have, I think it's the expanded version of what you've put on screen here, shows that, for example, there's a prohibition on serving alcohol in this area, isn't there? That's the one. It's the same one, yes. Whereas now alcohol is served in the clubhouse, so that suggests either that they are, that there must be some other legislation that has changed the terms of the lease.
The key reason that you've been asking these questions is because if you were saying, well, is the land free for the recreational use of people in Plymouth? We now see that it's not free because Plymouth is claiming that it can enact some pretty onerous controls over what you do on that land. And at the same time, land that was given to the city, Plymouth City Council can now make money out of that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have further information on the actual covenant, and I would like to know that. But as I say, a number of old timers here, people in their 80s, have said yes, there's definitely a covenant. I haven't uncovered it so far.
Right.
But certainly we are being fined just for using the fields. I mean, the fields, if you go out, the fields here locally are much, much emptier. People are frightened. Those people who live in the adjacent streets are those people who use the fields, used to use the fields. And morning and night, you'd see lots of people, and people would stop and chat. And now people are frightened, and you can't reach out to them. They're not people who are kind of tech savvy and they're following the situation. They've just been frightened once, and that's it. They've gone,
Right.
and that's the result of this PSPO,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out that under the Welfare of Dogs Act, 2006, Section 9 or something
Don't
like
know.
something. As a dog owner, we are under an obligation to adequately exercise our dogs, and it specifically uses the word exercise. And there is a difference. Walking your dog is one thing, allowing it to exercise is an entirely different thing. And it's something that all dogs need, and we are, as dog owners, obliged to provide that exercise. Now, this PSPO that they've introduced about the white lines removes our opportunity to do that in these fields just so they can make money, because it certainly doesn't make any difference to dog droppings on the field or on the ground in general. It bears off. They're withdrawing our opportunity to comply with the law by producing another law, which is a nonsense. It's just a flimsy excuse to take money from people.
And then they're policing it, to use that term, with
Yeah.
men that most
Yeah.
people would describe as thugs.
Totally yahoos.
Yes, yeah.
The interesting thing is, though, Brian, that, as I say, I came in 2016 and I had two golden retrievers, and there was no issue. But then the naming, is this a park or is it a sports pitch, or is it a recreational field? It has come to my attention through asking the council that the council now have 16 recreational fields where they use these tactics, and those are the fields across Plymouth where there's been a sports pitch, where there is a sports pitch. Now, if you look at the map of Plymouth and you take 16 fields, there's not much else left. Where are you supposed to take your dog off the lead?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that I have the document from central government, which is guidance for councils, and they say, be very careful, make sure that there's you don't just displace the activity that you're trying to eradicate, or make sure you give proportionate space. But there's none of that. It's just, no, you can't exercise your dog in any of these 16 places, or we will bully you.
Yes.
And that is a major, I don't know what percentage, but it is a huge percentage of the green space across Plymouth. It's a massive disturbance of the status quo. And nobody said, we're going to do this, and it's here. It's just done by stealth.
The other thing that comes in my mind with this, and I'll be careful because I'd need to go and sort of check exactly what's happening. But I remember that some time ago in Plymouth, and it was happening in other cities, we had city management companies being installed, and they were using individuals in uniform, often looking incredibly similar to police uniforms, who were policing city centre areas and fining people if they dropped a cigarette. But also many people found them to be quite intimidating in the way they conducted themselves, very officious, very overbearing. And of course, they always tried to lead you to believe the police were on their side. So that's one comment I would make, that as you tell the story about these wardens, made officers, as Plymouth City Council likes to call them, but made worse by the fact that they're in pretty thuggish plain clothes and they're big guys, and they're behaving in very strange ways. But in my
Yeah.
head came, yes, we've seen this before with the creation of so-called patrolling officers in city centre areas. And then I'm just going to add a little anecdotal story, and I can look at the camera and say, I know this is correct because it was told to me directly after the incident. But many years ago, Tony Blair came to visit Plymouth, and he was in some talks and discussions with the city council about the city and how the city would develop in the future. And after the meeting, one of the gentlemen who was in attendance came to see me and said, Brian, I've just listened to something which I just found incredible. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, there was discussion about how the city would develop. And to my amazement, they were talking about almost what class of people could live in what part of the city. And as my head was sort of reeling with what this was really meaning or seemed to mean, a senior member of the Plymouth City Council said, but we're having some trouble in some areas. We're having a bit of pushback from the inhabitants of Plymouth. And Tony Blair's response, and this is what this gentleman wanted to tell me, Tony Blair's response was, well, you have been given special powers and you should use them. And of course, what Tony Blair was referring to were changes in the powers being given to city councils and local authorities to enable them to bring in these laws which were going to control the way people could live in the city. Now, obviously, that was Tony Blair, and that was many years ago, but that comes straight back into my head. And here we have these individuals as enforcers of policy which has been made largely out of sight of the general public.
This is it, because if you introduce a PSPO according to national government guidelines, you have to go through a consultation process, and the consultation process for the 2020 PSPO is online, and it's a Mickey Mouse document of 2 pages with questions like, do you think people should pick up after their dog, and do you think dogs should be on lead in or not allowed to go into children's playgrounds or be on lead in cemeteries? Kind of the kind of statement where pretty much everybody would be in agreement. But at that time, this situation that we have now with 16 fields being impacted was not current. Those questions were asked before we had the PSPO, which absolutely changed the nature of dog walking across Plymouth. So yes. Those people, I think there were about 1,000 people, and they were touch and go on this and that, but they didn't know what the situation that we now find ourselves in was going to be like. I mean, they had no idea that this was going to come out of the PSPO. Right. Nobody could have envisaged it.
Judy, just to highlight it again for people who might not have picked it up, because I know you did mention it earlier, the PSPO is a Public Spaces Protection Order. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We've got a number of things happening here, but of course the key bit is how you were treated by these individuals. And you've said that to date you've had no apology from the City Council. You haven't had any response saying what the result of their investigation has been, if such an investigation took place. Gary Streeter MP seems to think one was happening, but you haven't received any apology or any further information from the council.
No, but I have made a second Freedom of Information request, and the results of that are due to be in my inbox on or before April 13th.
Okay.
And I asked what the result of the investigation was, and if the 2 people who harassed us are still in employment, and have they been redeployed, and what's happened. I also asked what is the age of the people who have been fined, because my first Freedom of Information request included a question, what is the gender? Because it's anecdotally, speaking with the people locally, it was elderly women.
Right.
And although the remit of the dog wardens is to ask your name, age, date of birth, and email address, they say they don't record gender. And I'm anticipating they will now tell me they don't record age as well, because that was my second question.
I'm going to add in here, and I think I'm correct in saying this, and the only person who can actually ask you who you are for your name is a police officer who's got reason to ask you that question. So these officials are claiming a power, it seems to me, that they don't actually have. And clearly, from your experience, they're prepared to use intimidating techniques if they don't get an answer. We're just over the hour, so I think that we should probably close here. But just at that point, you've had this horrible experience. You're now delving into how Plymouth City Council is policing this issue and what it's doing behind the scenes to raise money. You've got the UK column audience, which will be in UK, but it'll also be overseas. What would your message be to our audience? Why should people pay attention to what's happened to both of you?
Because this is a huge, absolutely huge authoritarian gesture by our local council. I mean, to change the use of vast amounts of public land and say, as of today, we're going to fine you, we're going to bully you, we're going to send people out to harass you. In fact, the only way to police this PSPO is by harassment, because they're open fields. What are you going to do? There is no way for them to continue this policy other than by frightening us. And this is an absolutely, well, I would call it fascist. It's an authoritarian regime. I've had no answers from my councillor, from any of the councillors I've contacted. Nobody has contacted me other than through my request for freedom of information. Nothing. And nobody in the community knows anything about what's going on. So from start to finish, it is authoritarian. And I think we should all be very, very careful, because where is it going to end?
We're at the top of a slippery slope.
Yes, yeah. They don't tell you anything about it. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you both very much for having the courage to come and join UK Column.
You weren't that ferocious. It's not you we're frightened of at all.
Well, thank you for that.
Very much.
But I know to get in front of a camera and start to talk about what's happened to you, this can be challenging for people. So that's the reason I say it. But I'm going to thank you again for agreeing to do this and to talk out to the audience. And I'm going to say to our audience, I completely agree with your summing up that this is the start of a slippery slope. And if people don't realise what's being done here, how it's being done, and where it leads, we are going to be in serious, serious trouble. So, Judy and Paul, thank you very much for joining me today.